Radio. Well, let's find out what the Greens think of last night's budget. We're joined from Canberra by the Greens leader, Senator Milne. Good morning. Thanks for your time. Now, your decision and the opposition's to block the cuts to company tax has seen the government introduce what it's calling the sharing the benefits of the boom package. That's worth about $3.5 billion. Are you pleased about this?
Well, I'm certainly pleased that the government heeded our advice in saying that we need to reduce the inequality in Australia and we ought not to be proceeding with the large cuts for business, big business, and instead we should spend it on building the nation. We would have liked to have seen investment in more systemic change. We would have liked to have seen some of that money go into the implementation of the Gonski Review, because you can't be a clever, knowledge, information-based nation without investing heavily in education. So I think that is one of the areas we're disappointed about. Having said that, some money's going into the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which we welcome, and also into Denticare, which was part of the Greens agreement with the government, and I'm delighted that more than $500 million is going into improving public dental, getting rid of those waiting lists. That has to be a good thing. The disappointing thing in terms of helping Australia's most vulnerable people is that in those cash changes, we would have liked to have seen an increase in the New Start allowance of $50 a week. That's what everybody agrees is necessary, because people living on $244 a week are living below the poverty line, and that just simply isn't right.
We'll come to some of those issues in a moment. I just want to stick with those company tax rate cuts for a second, because you had championed that or wanted the tax rate cut for small businesses. That's now not likely to happen. That's not good news for small businesses, is it?
No, well, we would have supported the tax cut for small businesses. We've been very clear about that, because we see them as one of the main employers and drivers of resilience in communities. The government, however, has made that decision and decided that the loss carryback provisions would be better for small business. Now, we're happy to look at that. We want to hear from small business as to whether those loss carryback provisions will assist them in a similar way to that a tax cut might have been, and that's something we'll be talking to people about before that legislation comes through.
Business as a whole is very unhappy with this budget, because it says it's not giving anything back to business at a time when the economy is struggling.
Well, I would have liked to have seen more money directed to nation building. I think a lot of money needs to go into research and development, into looking at how we do lift productivity, particularly across rural and regional Australia. But having said that, at least $217 million was announced last week for projects right across rural and regional Australia in helping to build carbon in the landscape. And to that end, also for the community, the carbon pricing package has delivered that change to the tax-free threshold to go from 6,000 to 18. So now a whole lot of people across Australia, particularly those in part-time work, will be benefiting enormously from that change that charging the polluters for their pollution is going to bring to the whole community.
Are you concerned the government is rushing the budget back into surplus?
Well, the Greens have said all along that we, together with most economists, think that the surplus is a political imperative rather than an economic one. We thought more flexibility ought to have been looked at. We should get back to surplus in the economic cycle, but we certainly didn't think that we should be pushing it this hard this year, because we're worried that in southeastern Australia in particular, this could drive some states into recession, and I'm particularly concerned about Victoria and Tasmania in that context. And we would have taken the advice of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, when she said, look, getting back to surplus is good, but you've got to have some flexibility in doing that.
Now, will you block changes to the single parent allowance that will put single parents onto the New Start allowance once their children turn 8?
Well, we've certainly said that we are opposed to that. We don't like the fact that the most vulnerable people here are the people who are going to have to pay for the nation to get back into surplus. So there are two groups of people, the people on New Start and those single parents who are really suffering here. We've got the opportunity to abandoned the fuel tax credits for the mining industry, for example. We had the opportunity with the super profits tax to raise more money, and that is still the opportunity there for the government to raise some money so that the most vulnerable in Australia, and indeed around the world, with the foreign aid being cut, that really is not a good idea in an Asian century where you're saying Australia will get to a surplus on the backs of the poor, both around the region and the most vulnerable in Australia, notwithstanding that I am pleased to see that there has been a push to reduce the inequality in Australia with some of the payments that are being made.
Christine Milne, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.